because I want to pick up what you.
Your phone number?
Okay.
What's that?
He's on the way. He's parking. He was trying to find a parking lot.
Okay.
So he's coming. You can introduce it. Chloe could go first. I'll go second. And I'll talk to him.
Okay.
So you gotta worry about that.
Welcome everyone. We're starting. Tom's gonna rush in and he'll present as well. Welcome to the Chinese American Identity Roundtable. Today we're going to talk about our identities, particularly Chinese American identities. So I'm going to give you an introduction. I'm Professor Jenny Vaughn, Associate Professor of Anthropology and Asian Studies, Coordinator of Asian Studies. And do the roundtable, so we'll have everyone try to just say your name, and then we'll have a 10-minute introduction.
Oh, so I'll go first?
Yeah, you're first.
All right. Hello, my name is Chloe Wong. I was born and raised here in Fresno, California. I now live in San Francisco, in the neighborhood of North Beach, which is directly adjacent to Chinatown. My family sort of ended up in the Central Valley in very different ways. My mom and her family immigrated here to Fresno from Guangdong, China when she was 20. Basically, she had an aunt that was already based in Fresno, and that's how her aunt sponsored her entire family to come here. And then on my dad's side, my dad was born and raised in Fresno, and his great-grandfather lived in Fresno, Chinatown actually, and then went back to China. So there's sort of like a longer roots here. And then generations later, his father, my grandfather who were here, immigrated to Fresno and as a teenager, and then the rest is history. So that's how we kind of ended up in the Central Valley. Basically, I think I would say like when I was young, I wasn't really aware of my Chineseness. I think I perceived myself as different just based off of like how other kids at school would treat me. But I think like I didn't really have the language to describe that necessarily. And I went to predominantly white schools in Clovis Unified, and so there were not a ton of kids that looked like me. Even though I was friends with some Asian kids, I would say like we didn't really fully understand like our cultural identities. We didn't really talk about it. There wasn't really like, I guess like camaraderie in the way that I think maybe now there is. My parents also made a conscious decision to not teach me how to speak Chinese. So me and my siblings don't speak Chinese actually, and I think they did it because they didn't want us to be ostracized at school. And I do have some like regrets about that because, for example, both sets of my grandparents speak Chinese, and so I cannot really converse with them at length. And so that's something that is sort of bittersweet. But I also can see how that would have been difficult for me growing up and kind of navigating school and trying to navigate two different languages. And so I understand that. Also, when I was in school, you know, like something that was important was like trying to belong. And so I feel like I like suppressed a lot of my identity because I wanted to fit in and be accepted, and I could feel that sort of difference and things like that. So I didn't really perceive myself as Chinese until the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, many members of which were here, reinstated the Chinese Youth Group, which was a youth group that brought together different high schoolers of Chinese descent across the Central Valley. And basically, as a group, we started just, like, it taught me a lot of leadership because we have meetings and we make decisions together. We also had a lot of cultural events. We participated in volunteer work and cleaning, like, the Chinese cemetery and the Chinese school. And so it brought us, a lot of us together as a community. And I feel like that's the first time that I really felt like, oh, this is my culture. And, like, being around other kids who look like me and have that sort of same, they're facing the same difficulty with their identities, trying to like sort of suppress it at school, but coming together on the weekends and, you know, getting to really like view that as like an identity and something that we should be proud of was really impactful and really pivotal to me growing up. And it also allowed me to see a world outside of like the school that I felt very confined to. And then eventually I went to Fresno City College here, and then I transferred to UC Berkeley and I studied English, and I sort of read a lot about like Asian American identity and writing, and I read a lot of theory, and reading of like Asian American theory is kind of difficult because I feel like you see a lot of yourself in it, but then it also makes you like turn away from it too much when you start theorizing too much. And so, I don't know, I feel like it brought me both closer to the subject, but also further from the subject. And then after that, I stayed in the Bay Area and where I now live, and then I started my career in publishing. And I work for the University of California in academic publishing, and I live in China, like near Chinatown, and it's really interesting to sort of live in a predominantly Chinese neighborhood where people look more like me, but I'm an adult now, and I wonder sometimes about like what it would have been like to grow up with more of that. But I also really enjoyed my childhood a lot, and I'm really proud of like being from Fresno and having lived one in there as well. So it's interesting.
Go ahead, follow up. So, in case you don't know, I taught Asian American Studies for like 30-some years. I'm teaching part-time right now, and so I like to kind of like interact with students, and so I'll interact with you in the back. Can you look? Okay, so Lynn, here's a question. Why are you here today?
Well, I'm a Chinese, and I born and grew up in a country called Burma,
Okay.
and became American, many years ago.
Okay.
So I'm interested in Asian culture, Chinese
Okay.
culture, and you have a discussion about Chinese culture, American culture, everything. So, and also I'm a friend of you. So I just want and
like he beats me. Anyway, okay. So usually the pat answer I get from students is along the thought line. I got in my car, I drove here. So that's why I'm here. And I said, no. True. Like I know you drove your car here, but the message I tell people, the reason you're here because of the past, because of your parents, because of your grandparents, because of your deceased ancestors, all the way back. People basically, I think you mentioned it, sacrificed, struggled, and survived for you to be here. So if you look at yourself, you're just one link in a chain. Link to the past, link to the future. That makes sense? So I would say one big part or component of identity to me is ancestry. You cannot deny your ancestry. We need to acknowledge, we need to appreciate the people of our past. And I think in terms of identity, if we take ethnic identity, it's not just Chinese identity. Whatever your background is, everybody should take pride in that. This is a component of who you are, okay? So if I think ancestry as one component of identity, the next part is culture. What is our culture? Well, the title, hey Tom.
Hi.
Okay.
I so apologize to everyone if my information was incorrect. I thought it was right from 11:30 to 12:15. So my apologies. I'm glad this is not a courtroom. I can say. Hey, Tom. Hi. Have a seat. Pleasure, Doctor.
Have a seat, Tom. Okay. Okay. So I was saying like culture. Where do we get our culture from? You know what I mean? For me, I'm second generation. You guys know what second generation means? I know Norman. What does second generation mean, Norman?
the second generation.
Yeah. Pretend you're in my class. It's a test question coming up. If you don't know second generation, you're gonna lose a point.
Well, my parents were not born here, so I was born here, so I consider myself first generation.
How we use it in my class, I'm not sure
Yeah.
how other instructors use it. I think second generation is being born here. Okay? So if we're born here, a big influence on us would be our parents. Big time. You know what I mean? In other words, say my parents, they passed away, but what language did they speak to me in? Chinese. What food did they give to me? Chinese. You know what I mean? What values did they have? We could say they're Chinese values, but it could be like other values as well. You know what I mean? Kind of like role models of how they live. So those things they impart to us. So being second generation, a big part of who I am is Chinese connected because of my parents' influence. On the other side, being second generation, we're born in America, we grew up in America. What's our dominant language? English. What schools do we attend? American schools. So, in other words, if we look at our identity, part of it's Chinese, and the other part is American. You can't divorce it. You know, okay? So, if we look at ancestry, culture, what else makes up identity? Perspective. How we see things. What does that mean? Like, how do we see things? How we see things is in a certain way. How other people see us is another way. So let's take it from other people's point of view first. Okay. You guys know what the term ABC stands for, right? American-born Chinese. Watch out. Overseas Chinese. Banana. That's in our days. They use the term banana. They don't use banana now. It's Twinkie. It's Twinkie.
That's not true. That's not true. Norman's dad calls me banana all the time.
Okay. That's very interactive. But going back to this, you know what I mean? Like, maybe other people see it that way. Another part of how people can see it, Chuk Sing stands for kind of like, I feel it's kind of derogatory. You know, being described as bamboo found inside. In other words, say you don't have culture. My counter argument to that, you know, and kind of like a discussion I had with so many weekends ago type of thing. What makes up your identity type of thing? I feel that we decide where we are. We decide, hey, this is Chinese side of me, this is the American side of me. Case in point. Well, isn't there? I've been involved in Kung Fu for like 50 years. I Kung Fu school for 30 years. If we take people in China, is there like 20% of people practicing Kung Fu? I don't think so. Probably less than 10%. You know what I mean? So really, isn't it for us to decide what makes up our identity? So, how we see ourselves, and I would say, for Chloe, it sounds like, well, I'll wait for the roundtable part for that. But those are three elements for me. Ancestry, culture, and perception. Don, it's your turn.
My turn. I'm not sure where you're at. Did you already go through your background?
It's up to you. It's basically how you want to
Are
explain your identity.
you at the roundtable portion?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Ask you to introduce yourselves.
First of all, thank you. My name is Tom Yin. I'm a retired attorney, but don't hold that against me. I retired. I couldn't find honest work. But first of all, I'd like to thank everyone for inviting me here because I am a graduate of Fresno State. Little background, I was born and raised in San Francisco. First generation, I'm kind of like your description. My parents came over from China, and I'm the first generation that were born in America. As a youngster, I attended Catholic school through primary grades. But at high school, I applied for and accepted to Lowell High School in San Francisco. You probably doesn't mean anything to you, but in San Francisco, there are 3 schools that Chinese parents want their kids to go to or attend. Lowell High School, no issue. You can't go to Galileo, can't go to Lincoln. College, they want you to go to Stanford or Cal Berkeley. That was the Chinese definition, okay? So Lowell High School is ranked by U.S. News and World Report as the 85th best high school in America. It's based on your academic accomplishments. But you should be proud. Fresno State houses or hosts University High. That is ranked 79th in the nation, so that's something to be proud of. My daughter attended University High. We used to have no arguments about that, as you can imagine. But after high school, I attended Fresno State, as I mentioned. Since I didn't get it, I didn't apply to Berkeley. Anyway, a long story short. So my mom was disappointed, even though I graduated summa cum laude down here. But more importantly, I met my wife while I attended Fresno State, so that was a big accomplishment for me. After graduating from Fresno State, I eventually returned to San Francisco to attend law school. I attended UC Hastings College of the Law. They've changed their name since. But even though that was a UC campus, my mom was so disappointed it wasn't Berkeley. But she got over it. But after passing bar, I returned to Fresno to practice law. I was a labor law attorney and a civil law attorney as well, both in private practice as well as eventually became in-house counsel to an insurance company. Now, we've all, I'm certain Chloe and John has spoken about their experience. We've all heard stories or read stories about how Asians have been discriminated against, harassed, violence committed, victimized, attacked, especially recently based on the COVID incident. Chinese were blamed. There were attacks up in the Bay Area. My sister luckily was able to avoid it, but she was accosted, not accosted or anything like that, just in the streets. So, but historically, Asians have been discriminated against, as you know. It was formalized by law as well as an executive order. The Exclusion Act, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 barred Chinese workers from coming into America for 10 years. Chinese immigrants were not allowed to apply for citizenship, and there was an issue about re-entry into the states if you left the states. By executive order 9066, Japanese Americans were interned during World War II. They were rounded up, relocated, and incarcerated because they were perceived as a national threat. There was the Korematsu case that tried to rectify that, but don't kid yourself. It still is applicable. It's good basis for law because under the Constitution, we have our basic rights. Most laws are rationally based, but if there's a grave state interest, a compelling state interest, they still can reach our rights of our Bill of Rights. So some of my other minority friends, Arabs especially, said, hey, don't kid yourself. If they declare it as a compelling state interest, you can be hauled away. So Korematsu did recognize the law, but the law does not change. It is still constitutionally possible. Well, having said that, when I was growing up, I also knew I was ethnic Chinese. My mom primarily spoke Chinese. She cooked Chinese dishes at home for dinner. I even had to attend Chinese language school 2 nights a week after regular school. So you can imagine how upset I was about that. As a child, I was neither proud nor ashamed of being Chinese. I never gave it a thought. It was just me. It was like me being a male right-handed. It was just part of me. But as a youngster, I was never called out for being Asian. I did not hear any racist remarks. I was never picked on as an Asian, and I never got into any fights being Chinese. However, having said that, that's not true as an adult. I did have bias incidents. 4 times I've been pulled over by law enforcement while driving. Twice, one time occurred in San Francisco, another time occurred down here in Fresno. The officers told me that I fit the profile of a person they were looking for. After the stop, I cooperated, answered her questions, and I was released for it, not released, but I was allowed to go forward. There were two other incidents that happened. One in South San Francisco, and one as I was driving to myself southbound 99. Those two incidents, the officers pulled me over for the flimsiest of reasons. One was that my car seat, my daughter, was not belted, which was untrue. And the other one was, if you can believe it, I was driving my Porsche, and back, you know how you have those annual stickers? There was a hairline crack on the right top corner. There's no way in hell the CHP officer could see that hairline crack. Because he asked me, son, do you know why I pulled you over? I said, officer, I have no idea. The escort me back, he goes, look at that. And I'm looking, I barely could see it, because it was not apart, it was still together, this hairline fracture. So I knew it was the excuse. But so I had memorized his badge number and his name. And I won't go into detail and bore you, but when I was in House Counsel, I represented the Department of Highway Patrol down in the area 2 weeks before I had given a presentation in Hanford at the Irwin Street Inn. So after I asked him, hey, did you attend that? And all of a sudden, he 180, and he kept me on side for about 15 minutes, chatting with small talk. So you know that was total BS, because I knew the captain, I knew the area commander. But having said that, I was pulled over for what White friend said. It was a DWM. You're driving while a minority in a luxury car. So I have no other reason but to believe that, because it was after commute hour. I was behind traffic. No way, heck, I was speeding. I was following back. He just came off the side and called me in. So those are the 2 times, about 4 times that I will go. As an attorney, I did experience twice one time. I was representing this big grower. You guys might, back in the day, Alberti olives, we're general counsel to them. So there was an administrative hearing up there, and it was being conducted at the Madera Valley Inn. So I walked in, I'm suited up. When I'm walking in, asked the desk clerk, hey, where's the hearing being held at? And he was just rude. He was reluctant to give me any help, and he was, until Phil Birdie walked by and down the hall, he goes, hey, Tom, we're over here. Well, the clerk realized I was representing the O'Birdies, and all of a sudden he changed. He didn't apologize, but he became nice as sugar honey. But it pissed me off, because just because I was a minority attorney, he thought I was representing the other side, and I couldn't represent O'Birdy olives. You know, it was shocking to him. But anyway, I let it pass. Now, on the positive side of Asian bias, I did benefit from it. In my younger days, during college, I was stopped at a signal light in San Francisco, red light, waiting for it to turn. It turned green. This older lady was walking in the crosswalk, so I had to wait. But then all of a sudden, the car behind me, honking, and I went like this, and you know, there's a lady walking. Well, lady completed her traversed the road. She got up, and I started to proceed, but the guy would not let up. He tailgated me for several blocks. I don't know if you know San Francisco. This was on Ocean Avenue, it's a pretty long street. And I was there, what the heck? So I pulled over, and I stopped, got out of my car, and walking towards him. He got out of his car and started walking toward me. This fellow was a mountain of man. It was like Haas Cartwright from Bonanza. Oh, crap. So he goes, I go, hey, what's your problem, man? Didn't you see that lady in the crosswalk? What do you want me to do? Run her over? He just kept yelling and screaming. And I said, oh man, this is escalating. So I turned around. I was going to my car, and this statute of limitations run on this. I was carrying double sticks. So I was going to retrieve him because this guy was too big for me. So I needed to kind of even out the odds. But as soon as I started turning, he goes, and I apologize for this, but this is verbatim. He goes, oh, hell no. You know that kung fu shit. I said, so? And then also he got in his vehicle and he took off. Now this is where I was really stupid, and I was young and dumb. I got back in my vehicle, I started chasing him down the lane. With his good sense return, I stopped. But that was an incident, I thought at the time, and to this day, that he has seen some Bruce Lee movies, and that he must have thought biased that all Asian males knew martial arts. And that's the reason. I truly believe that's why he stopped. Because that guy could have kicked my butt easily. Double stick or double stairs. But let me just say, Bruce Lee was, for me, the very first positive Asian role model in media. Except if you want to count Charlie Chan, but that's a different discussion. Bruce Lee broke a negative Asian stereotype. Asians were seen as subservient, passive. We were in movies or film, TV, excuse me, reflected as sinister, villains, and Fu Manchu kind of stuff. We were inscrutable. Can't be figured out, right? So thank you, Bruce Lee, for that. He's not only saved me from that ass kicking, but two, he broke the model. First one I can remember, I grew up with Pop Sing and butlers or servants, or Susie Wong types. So, your generation is much younger, so you young bloods have a lot to be happy about. In conclusion, I could fit the myth of an Asian American as a model minority. Highly educated, high achieving, hardworking, strong family values. We follow rules and authorities, but of course we all know that the Asian American as a role model is a false stereotype. It's a myth. These qualities also apply to all other minority groups to the same extent that it applies to us Asian Americans. Non-Asian minorities are not a problem minority, and we as Asian Americans are not the model minority. So anyway, I want to thank you for listening to me and my little spiel. And I apologize if some of my wording was a little off-colored, but I get going. You should see my thoughts.
Right. So I'm just gonna do a quick demographic look at Chinese Americans, and then we'll go to the roundtable. We'll ask you some questions. So one of the most populated countries in the world is China, 1.4 billion people. I think that's an undercount. Actually, there are way more Chinese people. They're just, the census, they are not self-reporting. Looking at the U.S. American Community Survey, we have 5.4 million. Again, that's Chinese Americans. I believe that's an undercount because we have thousands. We have over 2 million undocumented. So again, it says officially 5.4. These are people self-identifying as Chinese. We all know that people from Southeast Asia, as one of the doctor here earlier, I'm defined as Vietnamese, but I'm not. And so there's a lot of people from Southeast Asia that are originally from China that are self-defining in other ways. Okay. So if you look at the demographics, I was doing my Asian American Studies class. Asians live most on the coast, right? California and New York, right? And so that's the majority bulk of Asians, and actually that's the same for Chinese, right? We have a new generation of Asians, like in the Midwest, that particularly in Texas, right? That's like a new kind of generational. So if you're looking at the demographics of Chinese Americans, they're very diverse, right? I loved how Tom said, it's not just, this model minority, right? For every wealthy Chinese, right, we have actually a lot of working class. So it's almost like, it's hard to look at the data because we have so many undocumented, right? But yes, there are plenty of some wealthy Chinese, but for every wealthy, there's also a working class undocumented. So it's very interesting. It's the most class segregated. Asian Americans are the most class segregated group, actually, of all the different ethnic groups, racial groups. So very interesting to be Asian American. In looking at Chinese Americans, there's a huge outmarry rate right now, including all Asian Americans as well. You see earlier with Japanese and Chinese, but Japanese and Korean, but now so much for Chinese. So, and also very politically varied. So, if you're from San Francisco, of course, you have the Asian American affirmative action, right? But now we have all these new mainland Chinese who are very much against affirmative action. So it's one of the most diverse and very fractured politically groups as well. So fascinating. So I think that's a good just demographic look. And of course, Chinese are not so. It's interesting, you know. So I'm from Daimler. The Koreans there would never talk about Central Valley, right? They're the wealthy transnational Koreans, but you know, I could tell them, well, actually, a lot of the Korean groups originally came to Central Valley, you know, Riverside here. So just like the Chinese, I went to UCLA, and so there's a huge kind of literature. A lot of it's on the coast in LA and San Francisco. But I'm so glad this voice is here. It's a hidden story. It's a hidden story and very important, and that's why we're filming it, about that Chinese in Central Valley. Okay. All right, so let's do a roundtable talk. As a Chinese restaurant kid, I'm going to ask you a slow ball question, but something going to hit your heart. What is your favorite Chinese dish and why?
Okay, let me go ahead and start. I wouldn't say I have any particular favorite dish, but that's on any food type of thing. I just eat.
Okay, sure. Growing up in San Francisco, it's the when I was younger, it was the quintessential ABC dish. Can anyone guess what that is? No, that's probably your generation. Our generation was tomato beef chow mein, correct? That was the quintessential, pardon me, kind of sort of. That was the quintessential ABC dish, right? So, however, oh sure,
Closer.
sure. Yeah. But now I have to say, my favorite is, I hated it as a kid, but I love bitter melon. Black bean sauce, bitter melon. I can only make it for me down at Golden in Tower District when it's in season, okay? Because nowhere else in town make it, and I tried it, but I can't. I can make the minute chow mein, but I cannot make it to bitter melon. Second one would be Gailan. I'm sorry, Gailan, cake pot.
I like bitter melon too.
May I tell a quick story? John and I recently resumed our friendship with other friends of State Rats. And we go to a Chinese restaurant once a month in Toronto. So the last time we were at Golden Dynasty, and I always order what's the fresh Chinese vegetable, right? They know me. And then John goes, I'll just have what he's having. I go, hey man, you almost have mapo tofu, man.
Well, that is what. Do Dr. Go.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
I'm gonna say I really like my area's orange chicken because its recipe is really great, and my grandparents are also in the restaurant business, and so I feel like I grew up sort of eating their food. I also really like my mom's fried rice. It's a comfort food, and I feel like my sister and I would make it sometimes. It's like the first thing we learned how to make in college. That was like reminiscent of home when you're feeling homesick. And I also like my popo's sticky rice. So sticky rice. Yeah, I just like popo's. Yeah.
Okay. Let me backtrack. I like see, okay? Soy sauce chicken.
And anyone in the audience, your favorite Chinese item or their favorite food?
Hey Don, you joke.
Okay. Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That's
The low pork.
what is it? What is it?
Rosta.
Rosa. Oh, fancy. Yeah. Delicious. Right there, yes.
Crunchy.
Kanji, yes, so 2 kanjis. So if you don't know, it's like it's rice that's like
Yeah.
kind of,
Porridge.
it's your heart,
It's
right?
porridge.
Yeah, porridge. Anyone else? Favorite Chinese food or? Alrighty. This is very controversial because I interview a lot of kind of Asian chefs. So I'm gonna have to ask you this controversial question. What is your favorite Chinese restaurant? And I'm sorry, some of you guys own Chinese restaurants in this room, so what is your favorite Chinese restaurant and why?
I'll be neutral. I don't have
No,
a
I think
favorite
it's
Chinese
Dan.
restaurant, so I'll leave it at that.
I think that was a cop-out, don't you think?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I
Cop-out.
think, no. I have 2, okay. restaurant owners that I will mention it, I apologize, it's only because I have not been there. But my two favorite in Fresno are the Golden Dynasty, because they really cook down-home Chinese food. And they can get that the done pork with the duck egg and stuff. I mean, the kind of pig pot, everything. But the other one, my first favorite, of course, would be in the Tower District called Golden, because they all, I can just walk in and they'll tell me what fresh Chinese vegetables they have from here. But the owner's Ben and Helen recently sold it to a relative, but they continue to good cooking, so to speak. So for me, being from San Francisco, it's kind of cool. The first time I came down here to attend Fresno State, my friends from Bay came down and I came out and go, man, we gotta take you back to San Francisco. You don't know Chinese food, do you? So, those are my two favorite.
I feel like the opposite, because when I eat in San Francisco, I'm like, it doesn't taste as good as it does in Fresno, which is so interesting. But, I mean, I love the Luau, which is my grandparents' old restaurant, which is not open anymore, so you can't even go there. But I feel like our family likes to go to Imperial Garden, because that's just where we've always eaten. And I feel like the dim sum is solid.
No comment.
Great.
Jenny, let me go back to that question. I think the restaurant that has changed the trajectory of my family the most is the Cho's Kitchen. That's the restaurant my parents opened back in the 1960s. Before they opened Cho's Kitchen in Selma, they worked 2 years in Hanford. My dad worked at the Imperial Dynasty, owned by the Wing family. My mom washed dishes at China Cafe. So for them, it was a big step that they could change their income. So I think that really changed the life for the kids and so forth. So I'd say that's probably the most significant.
So,
Oh, sorry.
you know, I love how you said mapo tofu. What is a Chinese dish that reminds you of your Chinese identity?
What dish reminds me of Chinese identity? I think people have mentioned several dishes already that remind me of identity. Bitter melon is one. So I mentioned xiao gai. I mentioned roast duck. So all that seems kind of like remind me of my identity.
Well, for me, it reminds me of my mom. Sticky rice. I love that mame bun, right? With the lap churro and some mushrooms. And my sister taught me it's the easy way to do it, so I cheat. But that's my favorite comfort food. It reminds me of mom because she would make that on occasions. It wasn't an everyday, not a routine thing, so it was special.
I don't know. I feel like, as I was saying, like growing up in a family that's in the restaurant business, I feel like the recipes that are passed down, like they make it a very specific way. So when you go to a restaurant and try tomato beef chow mein, there it doesn't taste the same as the way my mom makes it. So I feel like it's very linked to just eating food made by my own family, which makes me feel connected to like my Chinese identity. Because even going to like a San Francisco restaurant and trying their I don't know, there are various things. It doesn't taste the same. So, and I also think too, like because we're like not part of like I didn't try soup dumplings for a really long time until I was an adult, and I know it's like such a thing, but I've had that now, and I'm like, I don't know how to eat this. Like bite it and like you slurp it and stuff, and I'm like, I did not grow up eating that kind of Chinese food, and so it is kind of interesting how like even when I have that, I'm like, I feel like I'm a fraud because I don't know how to eat it right.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot because there's so many Chinese people. Like it's billions, over a billion. So, so now let's get deep because I think that you all are very historical and kind of a visualized community here. Can you speak more? And I think the history majors here would love this. What is the history of your family in Fresno? Can you go back? And I loved how Tom talked about you're not just here. You're part of this like this, you're part of your parents, your grandparents. Can you, I was very fascinated when you asked me to do this roundtable, because I was like, how did you get to Fresno? You know, like, I was like, how did your family get here? So could you speak a little bit? In my mind, I was thinking, are they restaurant workers? Are they railroad workers? Can you speak about your historical journey and kind of picking on what John said, maybe 2 or 3 generations? Like, how did you get to Fresno, and what were the occupations of your grandparents and parents, and even great-grandparents? Like, when did you arrive to US?
Okay. I never met any of my grandparents. They're all in China. My dad came to America as a teenager as a paper son. Tom mentioned the Chinese Exclusion Act, and so the idea of paper son, he came under false pretense, pretended somebody claimed him as a son. So he came over as a teenager, basically worked, starting a teenager, worked in restaurants most of his life. During World War II, he worked in shipyards because things opened up. When I was born in 1952, on my birth certificate, they put his occupation as janitor. So he essentially worked in restaurant business, moved to Visalia, lived in Visalia for 3 years, Hanford 2 years, before they opened up the restaurant. If we take my mom, people got married by arranged marriage back then, so she's betrothed at a younger age, goes to live with my father's family, you know, before coming over. When my dad, he went back to China, and so my mom got pregnant, had a baby girl in China, but she died during World War II. It's kind of like being young, not enough food and so forth. And so she basically came to America after World War II, you know, the fight for China between KMT and Communist forces. So she came during that time period, lived in San Francisco. She worked as a sewing woman, okay? They moved to Visalia during that time. My mom worked in a sewing factory. I remember that she used to have a picture of all the employees at the sewing factory. So I think there were 2 or 3 Chinese people. She couldn't speak English, but the skills that she had acquired, sewing in SF, allowed her to do it. They moved to Hanford, I mentioned. They had Mondays off. So during the Mondays off, they traveled to other cities to look at opportunities. Can we open a restaurant? And so forth. They found a restaurant which used to be run by Japanese people, okay? So they rented it. They put in several $1,000s to remodel the kitchen. They added a bathroom, okay? They brought in a 5-burner wok from SF, okay? And so they worked, but the time that they worked there was only 2 years. Because what happened at the end of the 3 years, the restaurant was sold. And the person that bought it wanted to put a car wash. And so at that point, my parents, somebody came to sell them like a store building, which used to be kind of like a pool hall or a thrift store. So they built it out. And that's the Cho's Kitchen that exists right now. If you look at that building, you have the building here, and you have 2-story in the back. And the reason that it's a 2-story in the back is my parents expanded out, and they built stairway to the top. My mom, because we bought a house in Selma at that time, so I don't know, it was like 2 miles or something. My mom figured if on certain nights that she had more work to do, she'd just sleep at the restaurant. And so if you go into the bathroom in the kitchen, it had a shower. You're not gonna find showers in a Chinese restaurant. But their thought was, this is ours. Nobody can kick us out. And so for them, it's kind of like heart and soul. I added the hours they worked in 1 week. 70. They work 70 hours a week. Like, I didn't work 70 hours a week. But the thing people don't realize, when you have a business, it really is a part of you. You know what I mean? When I retired, I acknowledged and thanked my parents for 2 things. I thanked them for giving me opportunity. They gave me the opportunity to go to college. They paid for my college education. They gave me freedom. It's like freedom in my life. They didn't say, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. Well, that's not totally true. My mom wanted me to be a pharmacist and marry a pharmacist, open a pharmacy, but I'm a disobedient son, so I didn't listen to my mother. Before I went to college, I asked my dad, what should I study? His answer was a question. What do you like? So you told me. The final thing I thank my parents for is they gave me pride. Pride in being Chinese. You know, be a good person.
What's called the question again?
Family.
So you're part of the invisible history. A lot of people don't think of Central Valley when you think about Chinese people. What is your individual history? How did your family, what year and geographics did your family, if you can go 3 generations up, when did you come to the United States, your family? What did they do?
My grandfather came early. He must have also been a paper son of Kachi Doi. But he settled in Hawaii and he was working there. But he was a sojourner though, because he just wanted to make money. And he did go back to China and purchase little pieces of land as he accumulated more and more. He did fight in World War I, or not fight, but he was in World War I, and he was buried at Golden Gate National. That was a surprise to me when I was a child and learned that happened. My father was brought over, eventually my grandfather, paternal grandfather, settled in the Sacramento area and was working at a grocery store. I don't know if they owned it or partial owned it, but it's in the old Sacramento area. So he brought my dad over early on. He was a teenager. He attended Kachi High, actually. And that's my father's side of the family. He, like John's dad, my father was sent back to China to find a wife, basically. My mom tells me the story that in her family, they were farmers also. They owned a farm, that they were lined up. And my dad just walked down the line. There were 4 sisters. So my dad was checking each one out, and it's like my mom, thank goodness, I guess, for me. But that's how it worked. And you know, they weren't in love, obviously. It was a convenience. They were a partner. But she had to remain in China while my dad returned to the Sacramento area and worked after schooling, what have you. World War II happened, of course. So my mom migrated to Hong Kong and stayed there until America changed their immigration laws. It allowed, what was it, in the mid-60s, allowed families to come over and give it. So she eventually migrated over to the States and they settled in San Francisco. My dad worked as a waiter, cashier, and finally a warehouseman. My mom also, I can remember it as a child, she worked at the fishery. I don't know in what capacity, but she would come home smelling like fish. But eventually became a seamstress as well, working in a factory and or also bringing work home, because we had a two-story home, and downstairs a garage. My dad built his own room that was dedicated to just sewing, basically. So that was that. But like John, on Father's Day, my brothers and sister and I always thank my dad for having the nerve, and my grandfather, for having the nerve to come over to America with nothing and not speaking language. And I can't even imagine that. So are grateful that they made those sacrifices. You know, my mom also, because I don't know what she had to do. I remember helping her study to take the naturalization test to become a citizen. But they were always afraid. I remember as a child that, well, my mom, not my dad, said, don't tell them that we're Gaji Doi, paper kids. Because she always thought immigration would pound on the door and call us away. So that was a little bit traumatic for us as kids, because we're just youngsters. But anyway, lucky statute of limitations ran out because they can't haul my butt away. But, so we're thankful. That's my family history. The way I ended up in Fresno, and I would never move, is I love San Francisco, and I tell the young attorneys, hey man, when you're unencumbered, live in the city. But when you got a family, this kind of cool place to be. And you know, I mean, not to be saying, but Berkeley didn't have a criminal justice program. It was only limited to state colleges, and that's how I ended up at Fresno State. And I had two buddies. They're coming down here for the engineering program, so it was wonderful. And I swear to God, I love Fresno. When I was coming to visit the campus, I was going with an upperclassman. He's 1 year my senior. We're driving. I've been outside the greater San Francisco area. So we crossed the bridge. I've been across the bridge to Oakland, but we hopped into Castro Valley, right? And I go to Gary, wow, Gary, Fresno's not that far from Fresno. Holy crap, was I in for a rude awakening. The second rude awakening was driving through Los Banos. At that time, we were cotton fields. As a city boy, I had never seen cotton before, except at the end of a Q-tip and cotton balls in a bag. So I made my friend Gary stop. I ran into the field like a dumbbell. I go, holy crap. I picked up a couple of those cotton balls, and I kept it throughout my college days in my desk and through law school and what have you. It reminded me that the city is not everything. There's another style, and I just love the Central Valley, and that's how I ended up in Fresno, but not my family. They're all still in the city, San Francisco, Seattle. So that's my story.
I touched a little bit on mine in my introduction, and I also think it's interesting, like, to think about myself as like a historian, like, just because I feel like this panel was a great opportunity to ask my grandparents and my family about our origins, because I think oftentimes, like, growing up and like the dominant history that you're taught in school, I think it caused me to not actually ask my family how we ended up here. Even though I should have been more curious, I do feel like in some ways, like, when you're assimilating, there's almost like there's a disconnect, and also I think histories sometimes are hard for people to talk about because they're not the most beautiful histories, or there's some struggle there and sacrifice, and that's not always the most lovely thing to discuss. But I did love that I got to ask my grandparents about how they came here, and as I was discussing earlier, my yaya came here in 1959, and basically he was like working in a grocery store and as a butcher, and then he connected with a matchmaker in Hong Kong, and that's how he met my grandma, and then she immigrated thereafter, and then they eventually, I also think what's interesting is like there was a lot of support within Chinese networks here that helped my family and like their extended family like really settle here. There was a lot of like, aunts and uncles that are like sort of sponsors, or, like lending money to help get businesses off the ground and things like that. And so that's like a lot of unacknowledged work sometimes, because it does take sort of like a village to like bring people together. And so eventually they owned a grocery store. They also owned a restaurant that I mentioned earlier. And when my mom and her family immigrated here in 1986, around there, my mom was working in restaurants as well. And then she eventually worked at the Well, which is what my grandparents on my dad's side owned, and that's how she and my dad met. And then they fell in love, and now I'm here. So that's why I'm here.
You ordered the pen?
No, they purchased the restaurant from the
I see.
From the Zhangjiang,
Oh.
very nice wine.
And
Spent some
anyone,
good times there.
anyone for the audience? Does anyone for the audience want to share their Chinese migration history to Fresno? I'm also fascinated with people that are from here, right? Because a lot of Chinese are from New York. How did you get to Fresno? I was asking, what? I'm assuming a lot of you are restaurant owners, etc. Great. Okay, well, I want to dial down a little deeper now into identity, and I, as an anthropologist that's gone to China dozens of times, I'm actually going to go deeper now in terms of your actual, what part of China are you from? Okay. Do you think that a regional identity, because when you're in China, no one says they're whatever from China. They're like, I'm from Shanghai, and that's my identity. So what part of actually China are you from, and what language, what are your dialects in your family? And do you think that affected your identity?
Okay, well, my parents are Cantonese, so they're here in Guangzhou. I think my mom told me when I was probably like 10 years old, she said from Ponyu Awuchun Daihong, which I think as the translation is the Ponyu area, Awu village in the Daihong section. We went there one time, but Canton has really changed, very developed. In terms of like old village, there's no old village anymore. And so the first time we went there, basically my dad didn't contact his brother that we're coming to the village, but they recognized this is the Daihong Shu that they would go to. And when he went there, he's basically able to find his brother. So that's that. I would say for me, my Cantonese is not very good, but they said we speak like Kramawa, which is kind of like the village dialect type of thing. I think my Mandarin's a lot better. I studied Mandarin in college at Fresno State. My wife, links from Taiwan, speak Mandarin. So I would say my Mandarin is probably a lot better than my Cantonese.
I'm not certain which villages my mom and dad are from, but they were from the Canton region as well. I've never been back to China to visit the village that my mom and dad grew up in. My brother has, my wife has as well, but never had that opportunity because of work or other late excuses. I spoke Samyang, I guess, for lack of a better description, or say up. But for the Toji Doi is okay. Right. I love, if I may. Unfortunately, my daughter, next generation, does not speak any Chinese. She knows Chasi Bao, and she thinks Panda Express is good Chinese food. So, I apologize. It's good for what it is, but anywho, I wish I knew a little bit more. But I never had the desire to go back to China, to the village. I'm not certain why. I know my dad's family still owns a house there because they receive rent each year. Yeah, but it's minuscule, but it's like, so my mom always asks, what do you guys want to do with it after she passes? And obviously none of us, we would just give it to the existing family members that live there. But so sadly, I don't know anything beyond that.
What province?
It was in the Canton area, but I'm not certain which particular district or village.
My name was like whispering me the answer
Ah,
right now.
okay.
It's because, well, I think like part of it is, like I was saying earlier, like this is a great opportunity for me to learn through like my oral historians, because I think like it's very difficult and like complicated. So from my mom's side, like I've always heard like Canton region, Guangzhou, Guangdong, Shinduk, like all of, it's like very, yeah, there's a lot there. And then on my grandma, on my dad's side, she's from Hong Kong. And then I don't know the name of like the village that my grandpa grew up in, but they all speak Cantonese and say on my dad's side. Yeah.
And then any other audience members from Canton or Guangdong, anyone? Oh, some of you, okay. Oh, interesting, okay. All right, so, you answered if you've gone back to China. Some of you have, some of you haven't. Can you speak more about what defines your Chinese identity? Like, what defines it? You're here, obviously, it's got to be really important. You're at a Chinese identity roundtable. So, what defines your Chinese identity? Like, what makes you think you're Chinese? That you want to speak to us?
Well, kind of like I think I talked about Chinese identity earlier, about the Chinese and American part. I would say, well, maybe this is a little bit off on the tangent, but don't mind me. I think there's kind of like an undercurrent of anti-China and anti-Chinese sentiment in the United States now. Dating back to the COVID time period, they monitored kind of like hate incidents. And so out of the Asian ethnicities, the group that got the most was Chinese, at 40%. But you could look at that in a couple of different ways. If it's 40%, that means other Asian groups make up the 60% combined. So what I mean by that, I talked about perception, how people see us, so forth. So if we take two of the most extreme incidents of anti-Asian violence, one was in San Francisco, where the Thai grandfather was basically bum rushed, knocked down, and killed. That was in the news, okay? There's a case on that. So, and the other one was at Sam's Club, where a father and his children were being slashed at with basically a box cutter, okay? They're from Burma. So in terms of perception, we might be Chinese, but from other people, non-Asian people, they're not going to distinguish. They're not going to distinguish, oh, you're Chinese American or you're from China, type of thing. Everything's kind of like lumped together, even if you're non-Chinese, lumped together. I saw on the news because we have an election coming up. So one person running for office, his ad, illegal Chinese lab, you know, like in Reedley? Okay, so I don't see the ad now, so maybe they pulled it off, because I basically just watch local news. But my mind thinking, well, if it was a Mexican person, if it was Irish, if it was Jewish, would they put that in? No. My feeling is no. You know what I mean? So if you Google or check, what nation do most Americans consider an enemy? China comes up. Over 50%. And the next one after that is Russia. You know, they have South Korea and so forth. So last time we were in China, or over the summer, last year. So my son his wife had a baby. So they had a baby party. So talked to a guy named Arthur, okay? He played basketball for Clovis West High School, but he's living in China for like 20-some years. So he has 2 daughters. And he posed a question to me, you know, and I really couldn't give him an answer. The question was like, how come people in America feel so negative towards China? I couldn't give him an answer. This doesn't mean everybody's negative. Absolutely, you know what I mean? But when COVID hit, and it's being described as Chinese virus, Kung flu, is it really referring to Kung Fu practitioners spreading COVID? No. What's the association with Kung Flu? Kung Fu, Chinese. You mentioned Bruce Lee already, you know? So it's kind of like different things. I think, consider all that type of thing. For me personally, I was at Save Mart probably last year. So I see a guy wearing a shirt. I survived the Chinese virus. Did I say anything? I said nothing. Don't need to say anything. But what's the point? You guys make us sick. Isn't that the point? Isn't that the motivation when Anton bum rushed the Asian grandfather? Being blamed. So this is, for me personally, I just want to make a statement. And sorry for taking so much time, but I'm used to talking. I won't, and I don't dissociate myself from being Chinese. That's who I am. Agree with that. But I'm also American too. I'm not going to dissociate from that.
I'm proud to be a Chinese. Now, I mentioned earlier when I was young, I was neutral, only because I did not think anything of it. It was just a mutable trait, like I was a male, right-handed. But as I got older, I'm proud to be Chinese. You know, I'm proud of the culture we have, the history, but I don't want to stroke it like John. There is racism, obviously, always has existed. You know, John talked about the COVID situation where Chinese were being blamed. I mentioned it briefly, but in my days, in the 80s, there was Japanese was economically strong. They were buying golf courses, farms, everything, making cars. They were out selling GM, and there was a case in Detroit. Vincent Chin, look it up if you like. But this poor guy was just out on a bachelor party at a bar, and these two auto workers, they were discharged, as I recollect, took offense and said, you know, you Jays ought to get out of here, and what have you. Well, poor Vincent Chin was killed, murdered as a result of that. So, you know, racism always exists. However, I took it in my practice of law as well. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty. So, as a youngster, I never faced that racism, and you know, and I hear stories from John that you know he had problems when he was at school. I read Chloe's story in the newsletter, so she had some issues. But you know, I take the position that if you screw with me, then I will screw with you. But if you're innocent, I'm going to take you as is. Because most of my friends down here have never. You know, if anything, I give my white friends more trouble than they give me. And we're all teens, you know. So that's how I approach life. It's not that I don't recognize it. Racism exists. You know, like I said, when my sister told me about that incident up there, I'm not only worried for her, I'm worried for my mom. She's got Alzheimer's. She does still like to shop in Chinatown. And I don't know if some dumbbell will just walk around and see this older lady and just beat her up because she's Asian and there's a COVID condition. So I guess my point is that I'm very proud to be Chinese. And I love that, you know, I don't know about you guys, but you know, when I'm walking around somewhere and there's another minority guy, doesn't even have to be Asian, black, Hispanic, most of the time we give the dude nod, go like this. And it's the recognition that we do share something. You know, we're not the majority, but we do share something. So don't ever let them divide and conquer us. We're all in this, you know, together, kind of sort of. So I apologize. You know, I'm a product of the melting pot era. You know, Chloe's a different generation. But in our days, it was like, hey, everyone's different. Let's all get in a spot and blend together. We come out as Americans. And that's kind of my mentality. But as an adult, I'm proud to be Chinese. I'm proud to be able to speak a little Chinese, you know. So, I'm sorry, that's my position.
I mean, just to respond to what has already been shared, I definitely think living in San Francisco now, it definitely, you feel it when you walk down the street. Like I feel sometimes just like tense, and like I don't know, I feel like, especially for the elders, like I do worry about them, and I see them, you know, and they live their daily life, and this is their life, and it's like easy for me, I think, as a young person to be like, oh, okay, well, I can like run away, or I can, you know, I can move back home into Fresno where I consider it to be safer, and I have that privilege. But it's definitely, even my family worries for us to navigating the city, especially where a lot of this is at the forefront when you're walking down the street. But to answer also the question about how I, you know, sort of perceive my identity, I think a lot about like Chineseness in the way, part of it is like there's a lot of values, I think, associated with being Chinese and things that I've learned growing up, one of which is like family, the importance of putting your family first. You know, my mom cultivated a home where I feel like we ate dinner with each other every night. You know, we grew really close to one another, and I feel like we've always been taught like blood is thicker than water, and so there's a sort of like built-in trust that we have within our family, and that's really important. And then I think the other side of the coin is like being the eldest daughter in a Chinese family. You have a lot of responsibility. You know, you are supposed to take care of all the younger ones. You have to be the model for them. You are the resource for all the cousins, you know, everyone else, and a lot falls onto you. And I think I've been grappling with that because I feel like sometimes, you know, there's a lot of pressure associated with it, and it's something that I take pride in, but it's also something that can provide pain to me too. And both of my parents are the eldest siblings, and so I feel like they've passed on some of those values as well. And then another value that I think about is abundance, which can be positive because, you know, in Chinese culture, I feel like we're constantly like thinking about love as being abundant, which is a great thing. And we also think about like generosity being abundant, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. And then happiness and, you know, and all these things that we are wishing and creating for the next generation. You know, like John was saying earlier, like his parents giving him freedom. That is, I feel like that's associated with abundance, and that's a really beautiful thing. Because I feel that too, that my parents sacrificed so that I could have choice and to live a, you know, a beautiful life and, you know, have more opportunities. But the other side of abundance that I think can sometimes be negative is this sort of growth mindset that we have, which is to always be working towards the next thing, always be working towards a future, always be growing, always be, you know, thinking that you're not doing enough and always wanting to be doing more and not being satisfied with what you have, which I'm also trying to grapple with because I think sometimes that disallows you from being happy too. So there's sort of like contradictions within that.
Excellent answers. We have 12 minutes left, so I'm going to combine all three last questions into one. As someone who has a huge consumer of Bollywood and K-pop and Hong Kong film, what is your Chinese musical or film consumption, and how does that affect your identity? You mentioned Bruce Lee a lot, but are there other things like music, like Hong Kong film, and how's that affected your? So how's the media affected your Chinese identity? What's your consumption rates?
Well, I really don't watch Chinese dramas much, but on my flight back from China and Japan, I watched one of Jackie Chan's film, one where he has the horse. Have you guys seen that? This kind of thing? Maybe not. Okay. If that's not the case, I'll talk about the film The Love Never Ends, which I wrote about in the newsletter. Really, it's like when we were in Shanghai last summer, I think we watched about 8 different films, Chinese films. We watched Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible too, but all the other films were Chinese film. It's the idea with kind of like a older person who's kind of retired, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like a love story, but I think it's more than a love story. There's one scene, and the scene is where these older people, Norman, have you seen the film? Okay, yeah, I've seen it, yeah. So you have these like old people spraying water on each other. And so my thought was, that is so unrealistic. You're never gonna see 4 60-year-old Chinese people spraying water on themselves in the garden, right?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, he said no, but then I thought about it. What does it represent? It represents that these older people want to be like kids again. So the question I thought, like, if we had the opportunity to be kid-like, would we all choose to? Not to live our life totally over again, but to have that carefreeness, to have fun.
In terms of Asian media, when I was a youngster, growing up in San Francisco, my mom every week took me to one of 2 Chinese theaters to watch Chinese flicks and Chinese opera. Right? And so it was okay because she bribed us with candy. And we could go. There's one theater that you can go upstairs in the balcony. I forget the name of it, but you can goof around. But as I grew older, not really, because I watched television programs and or films. Chinese were depicted as servants, butlers, like I said, season 1. Flower Drum Song was cool because that had all Asian cast, but it was also kind of depicted kind of okay. But so, as I say, Bruce Lee was the first positive Asian role model, except for Charlie Chan. I won't speak on that, but I've been watching old Charlie Chan flicks, and even though, if I may deviate a little bit, it depicted, it's actually based on a true Chinese Hawaiian detective back in the 20s. And he was quite an excellent detective. But Charlie Chan in the books is described as very assertive, well respected, and knowledgeable. Worldwide, Hollywood had changed it a little bit, and it is offensive because not so much that they used a white actor to portray Charlie Chan, but that they had him speak in that fake, heavy accent, Asian accent, and dispersing fortune cookie language. That was kind of offensive. However, if you boil it down, it was a positive role model because this guy was admired worldwide. He was smart, logical, kind of an Asian Sherlock Holmes. Currently, though, there's one series I watch a little bit. It's called Warriors. It's on Max. It's based from Bruce Lee's daughter, the Shannon. And that was, and I had some discussion with friends about that. It depicts Chinese back in the 1800s and coming over here, various menial roles. But what's kind of cool, but not accurate, is that they do not speak with an accent, except the ones that actually have the accent. But they speak as if they've been educated at UC Berkeley. It's perfect, So, but it's a nice depiction. That's something I enjoy, kind of sort of. If there's any sort of Asian-based program, I would give it a whirl. There was one that also played, it was called Kung Fu, a remake, kind of sort of the old David Carradine one. And you may or may not know, but that Kung Fu, David Carradine, that was the brainchild of Bruce Lee himself, but it was co-opted from him. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling, I apologize. But unfortunately, I admire this generation. They have more positive images in the media. I didn't. I mean, all I had was Hop Sing, the dude on Paladin, boy, girl, what the hell, man. So it was tough. Like I said, I didn't grow up ashamed. It's just like, man. Have you ever watch movies? I talked to some Native American friends, and they said, yeah, man, when we used to watch cowboy and Indian flicks, we were rooting for the Indians. I said, I do that. But anyway, that's my show, sorry.
And you'll take the last 6 minutes, all for you.
Oh, the last 6 minutes. Well, recently I read a biography on Anna May Wong, which I really enjoyed. And I've never seen any of her films before. I only know her as like a cultural figure, which is interesting to, now I need to get a subscription to the Criterion Collection so I can watch her films. And I also when I was in college, I really liked Wong Kar-wai films. I really liked Chungking Express and Movies of Love. And I have to watch it with the subtitles on because I don't understand Chinese. So that's kind of another facet and something interesting of an experience. But like you were saying, K-pop is also, I mean, it's interesting too because I think growing up like in Fresno, you know, all Asian identities kind of just become one big one. Like there's not differentiation, at least for me. It wasn't until I was like really in high school and then further college to really understand the distinction between Chineseness and like other Asian identities. But there's something about like seeing, like my sister and I really like K-pop, and there's just something about like witnessing Asian excellence where you take pride in it, even if you're not Korean yourself. Like you see people who do look similar to you, and there is a sort of like cross-cultural like acknowledgement there, and I feel like that, I mean, that's just like media that I love to see. And then also like whenever there's like an all-Asian cast, I will give it a whirl. I recommend The Brother's Son on Netflix. You should watch it.
So we do have, you were very quick with that.
Yeah.
So we have 5 minutes left in the audience. Dr. Ng, is there any questions for them? We have 5 minutes. Norman, any questions for our panelists?
I do. Hi, my name is Butzmunch, and I'm half Chinese. I have a niece who is struggling with, especially after the COVID situation, she struggled with her own identity. What would you say to her, you know, to overcome that? And to be proud, like all of you feel proud to be Chinese, and she's only a quarter Chinese. What would you say to this little girl? How would you help her through to be proud of her identity?
I think the question was, Butova is half Chinese and her daughter is a quarter Chinese. And during the COVID time, she struggled with her kind of pride of being Chinese. And so how can you speak to that? How can you convey pride of being Chinese?
Okay.
How old is she?
She's 19 now.
19.
My feeling, and I talk about this like in the classroom when I lecture about Vincent Chin. And so let me connect it back to that, and I'll connect it back to the COVID thing. The story about Vincent Chin, how I mentioned it, what really caused the Asian American community to react was the sentence from the plea bargaining. And 2 men plea bargained to killing Vincent Chin with a baseball bat. One person held while the other person wielded the bat. So the plea bargain was basically manslaughter, but the punishment was 3 years probation and a fine. And basically the Chinese American community, the Asian American community were outraged, okay? I don't have to get into the details about that, but I posed the question to students. Can you imagine if you have a child and your child is killed with a baseball bat, thrown to the head, while somebody else holds them? That would be hard to bear, particularly if the sentence is no jail time, okay? So what I pose to the class is, we're all the same. We really are. Set aside whether you're white, you're black, you're Hispanic, you're Asian, you're rich, you're poor, you're good looking, you're ugly, you're straight, you're gay. At the core, we're all the same. When I was a docent at the Trinity Mansion Museum, we had 7 guests. Ellen Wu was here, but she left already. So I was chatting with the Chinese instructors. You know, I think the majority are from China. But the conversation we had is they agree. As people, we're all the same. So for your daughter, you know, to think about things with COVID, people really should see other people as the same as them. One of my favorite, analects from Confucius is the negative golden rule. Don't do to other people what you don't want other people to do to you. So addressing that Should other people blame you for anything? No. If your daughter is part Chinese, she needs to acknowledge all of her ethnicity. This is a part of who she is. She's a person like everybody else.
I'm sorry, call the question again?
I was just curious of what you would say to a girl who's struggling with her identity.
That's really a tough one.
Because she didn't want to be Chinese or part Chinese during COVID time.
I can appreciate that, because that you know, stereotype and blame a race. Oh man, yeah, everyone's individual, in my opinion. Obviously, comes to terms however they want to come to it. It could be very negative to all the way to the ultimate to self-realization. If I were to speak to her, I would say, you'll find a time that you'll come to peace in your identity. You can't change what other people think. All you can do is be yourself and be proud that you are yourself. And if I may just say, screw those, use a different term, but it's not legal. You have to really divorce it. It's hard to, of course, especially at 19, because you're trying to fit in. You want to blend in, right? And now you're kind of an outcast. I guess I was kind of lucky because I attended Catholic school, so I was always around 90% white, if not more. And Lowell was, in my day, 30% Asian, but now I think it's like 60%. So I never had that issue. But your child growing up in the Central Valley is different.
No. Grown apart between Petaluma and San Rosa.
Oh, I see.
90% white.
Okay, well, I was going to say that's totally different than San Francisco as well. But yeah, I would just say hang in there, and it'd be tough, but you got to really try hard to screw what other people think. It's more important what you think of them than what they think of you. But at 19, that's so difficult because the peer pressure is difficult. You want to fit in, but I try to just mentor her and say, I know it's damn tough right now, but you got to hang strong. Be proud of your heritage, and it will come to pass, hopefully. I know that's too nebulous of an answer. I apologize for that, because there's no single answer.
And Chloe, you have 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, I'll say as someone who was 19 like 10 years ago, and I would say it's okay for her to be angry about it. It's important to feel out the emotions, and sometimes you're not proud of your identity because it's a hard space to be in. But whenever I've been angry about things, I've always turned to art. So I feel like, literature written by Chinese Americans, film, like I was mentioning earlier, really seeing the beauty and the richness of our experiences and seeing that sometimes they're fractured, sometimes there's pain, and sometimes there's so much difficulty with reconciling with it. But seeing yourself in the art is really how I feel like you become okay with it, and that's how you really get through it. So I would really just recommend all different forms of literature. When you're to an exhibition or something that celebrates Chineseness, and really just sort of exposing her to different ways of being Chinese too, so that she can kind of see the full range of emotions and the fullness of the experience, I think will help her feel closer to it.
Wonderful question. Okay, well, I'd like to, let's all give a hand for our wonderful panelists. So thank you so much. Thank you for sharing.
Good job. All right, sorry. Good to see
Good Bella, how are you doing?